The Love That Never Died, Part 5, The Final Goodbye. The thin morning light crept through the curtains of James's living room, but it brought Hazel no comfort. She hadn't slept, not after the figure in the yard, the letter on the bed, the threatening messages. Every shadow seemed alive, every sound magnified. Someone was closing in on her, and she was running out of time. But she wasn't going to stop. Hazel sat at the table, the USB drive resting in the palm of her hand like a loaded gun. The video was her last hope, her last weapon. She had examined it over and over, trying to pick apart every pixel, but the figure who cut Ethan's brake lines remained blurry, faceless, untouchable. The only thing left to do was confront the people who had been in Ethan's life. If the truth was going to come out, it had to happen now. She glanced up at James, who leaned against the counter, his face lined with exhaustion and something Hazel couldn't quite read. Guilt, maybe, or fear. She didn't trust him. Not entirely, not anymore. But she needed him. "I need to see Claire," Hazel said suddenly, breaking the silence. James frowned. "Claire? Why?" "Because she's been lying to me," Hazel said, her voice firm. "I know she has. I've felt it for weeks. And if she's hiding something, I'm going to find out what it is." James hesitated, his lips pressing into a thin line. "You're sure about this?" Hazel nodded. "She was there the night Ethan died. She knows something, and I'm done waiting for answers." Claire's house was quiet when they arrived, too quiet. The blinds were drawn, the driveway empty, but Hazel's gut told her Claire was inside. She could feel it, that crawling unease that had been with her ever since Ethan's death. She knocked on the door, her heart pounding. James stood behind her, his shoulders tense. There was no response. Hazel knocked again, harder this time. "Claire, I know you're in there." Still nothing. Hazel's patience snapped. She tried the doorknob, and to her surprise, it turned. The door creaked open, revealing the dimly lit interior of the house. "Claire," Hazel called out, stepping inside. The air inside was stale, heavy, and the faint scent of something metallic lingered in the air. Hazel's stomach churned. James followed her in, his hand tightening around the wrench he had brought with him. "I don't like this," he muttered. "Neither do I," Hazel said, her voice trembling. They moved through the house, the silence pressing down on them like a weight. The living room was empty. So was the kitchen, but when they reached the hallway, Hazel stopped dead in her tracks. The door to Claire's bedroom was ajar, and inside she could see the faint glow of a computer screen. Hazel exchanged a glance with James, then pushed the door open. The sight that greeted her made her blood run cold. Claire sat slumped in a chair, her head tilted at an unnatural angle. A thin red line stretched across her throat, and the dried blood on her shirt told Hazel all she needed to know. Claire was dead. Hazel's hand flew to her mouth, a strangled cry escaping her lips. James cursed under his breath, stepping forward to examine the body. "She's been dead for hours," he said grimly. Hazel's knees nearly buckled, but then her eyes landed on the computer screen. An email was open, the subject line reading, "You were supposed to stop her." Hazel's breath quickened. She leaned closer, her trembling fingers scrolling through the email. It was from an anonymous sender, but the message was chillingly clear. "You failed. She knows too much. This ends tonight." Hazel staggered back, her mind racing. Claire had been working with someone who had planned Ethan's death, someone who had tried to scare Hazel into giving up. And now that someone had killed Claire to tie up loose ends. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, and she pulled it out with shaking hands. Another message from the unknown number. "You're next." The drive back to James's house was a blur. Hazel's heart pounded in her chest, her thoughts a chaotic storm of fear and determination. She was so close to the truth, but the closer she got, the more deadly the game became. When they arrived, James parked the car in the driveway and turned to her. "What now?" "I don't know," Hazel admitted, her voice shaking, "but whoever this is, they're not going to stop until I'm dead." James hesitated, then reached into the glove compartment and pulled out a handgun. He handed it to her, his expression grim, just in case. Hazel stared at the weapon, her stomach twisting. She didn't want to use it, but she knew she might not have a choice. That night, Hazel sat alone in James's living room, the gun resting on the table in front of her. James had gone upstairs to shower, leaving her with her thoughts. The house was quiet, but Hazel couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. And then the lights went out. Hazel froze, her breath catching in her throat. The darkness was suffocating, and the only sound was the pounding of her own heartbeat. "James?" she called out, her voice trembling. No response. She grabbed the gun, her fingers gripping it tightly as she moved through the house. The air felt heavy, oppressive, and every shadow seemed to shift and writhe. And then she saw him. A figure stood at the end of the hallway, their face obscured by the darkness. "Who are you?" Hazel demanded, her voice shaking. The figure stepped closer, and Hazel raised the gun. "Stay back!" But the figure didn't stop. Hazel pulled the trigger, the sound deafening in the confined space. The figure stumbled, collapsing to the floor. Hazel's hands shook as she approached, her heart pounding. When she reached the body, she gasped. It was James. The realization hit her like a freight train. James had been the one behind it all. Ethan's death, the threats, everything. And now he was dead. Hazel sank to the floor, tears streaming down her face. She had the truth, but it had come at a cost. Ethan was gone, Claire was gone, and now James, the last link to the conspiracy, was gone too. The house was silent, but in the stillness Hazel felt a presence. She turned, and there he was. Ethan stood in the doorway, his figure flickering like a dying flame. He looked at her with a mixture of sadness and relief. "It's over," he said softly. Hazel's voice broke as she whispered, "I'm so sorry." Ethan shook his head. "You did what you had to do. You found the truth." Tears streamed down her face as she reached for him, but her hand passed through empty air. "I don't want to lose you again," she said, her voice breaking. Ethan smiled, but it was bittersweet. "You never lost me, Hazel. I'll always be with you." And just like that, he was gone. Hazel sat alone in the quiet house, the weight of everything crashing down on her. She had the truth, but it had come at a price she wasn't sure she could bear. The world outside was moving on, but for Hazel nothing would ever be the same, and yet as she looked down at the ring on her finger, she felt a small glimmer of hope. Ethan's love had never died, and neither would her will to live, to carry on, to remember him. The end.